And it's like, just thinking about these situations that I laid out, it's not like I'm on some women got this issue. No, listen, man, we are under attack. The enemy is not flesh and blood. The enemy is not women. Men and women, 21st century, United States, the West, we are under attack from getting together in a scriptural relationship, scriptural marriage. Man, take the lead. Get you a wife. Lead your home. Be a provider, protector, priest. That right there, that is under attack. Now, if you want to do anything else other than that, Atlanta is the place to be. Okay, I'm telling you, it is the place to be. But if you want to lead your family, provide, protect, be the priest over your household, you're going to come up against some resistance, major resistance. There will be a huge attempt to prevent you, to deny you that. Okay? This is a spiritual attack. It will manifest through the society, and other aspects will manifest against your own mind, rationalizing things that really you don't need to be playing around with. This is not a game. Can't get with some woman and expect to change her mind. What you get is what you get. All right? If it's not settled at the beginning, you can't bet on it being fixed with time on the back end. Fellas, you want to do things the right way, the scriptural way. The way of the warfighter is a noble path because it's a difficult path. Finding a good wife, man, it's something that's if you want something like that, you got to fight for it. Talking about what you want as far as beautiful and sensible, it's going to come at a cost. Practice courage, self-control, righteousness, discernment. That way of the warfighter is a noble way. It's a righteous way to go. And I want to encourage brothers out there to stay on that path because it's going to pay off. I tell myself this, hey, I don't have all the answers. I'm a man, I'm fallible. I'm not the most awesomest guy ever. And so I have to reflect and think about things that I've done, good women that I've let slip away. Welcome back to the channel. It's the Battle Don. So today I'm going to cover a topic that is something that has been on my mind for a while. And what I'm going to talk about is the issue or the landscape, the dating landscape. So to all my Christian brothers and sisters out there that's single, that's out here trying to find a spouse, especially the brothers, Christian brothers out here trying to find a good wife, this one's for you. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry. I'm going to start right there because that's the focus of today's episodes. Now, what I'm going to do is address this issue forbidding to marry using Atlanta as an example, because I feel that Atlanta in many ways is a microcosm of the macrocosm in the dating, marriage problems that we're having in the United States, in particular in the West in general. I do a word study on this issue, this topic, forbidding to marry. So in the Greek, the word forbidden here is kaluo, to hinder, prevent, to withhold a thing from anyone, to deny or refuse. So we have this external action on the person. Then with Mary, we have Gameo, to give oneself in marriage, to give a daughter in marriage. And this one that I'm going to focus on for today, and it's so appropriate, to lead in marriage. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking at this not from the perspective of forbidding marriage outright. What I'm focusing on in particular is the scriptural concept of marriage, in which the man leads in the marriage, having that type of marriage. And from my experience in Atlanta, speaking with numerous young ladies, this is a problem. There is great resistance to this. And this resistance, it's like societal and spiritual. There is a spiritual attack on marriage in this context, and it manifests itself in society in different ways. So I'm going to talk about some of my experiences, and they're going to span from the material to the spiritual. We're going to start off in the material, and we're going to get increasingly more spiritual. And what you're going to see is an attack on scriptural marriage, in particular an attack on the man's role as provider, protector, and priest of his home that's created through marriage. So I'm going to start the most material of all, dealing with the ladies that are, we could say, gold diggers, interested in the money, the material that a man has. Now, before I actually moved to Atlanta, there was a bit of a preview, foreshadowing of this dynamic as it exists in Atlanta. So I'm riding in the car. I stop at a stoplight, and I look to my left, and I see a lady throwing some clothing on the ground. And as I get a better look, stop there at the red light, I see her truck. She's got a G-Wagon parked crooked on the curb, and she's really upset, and she's going back and forth from her vehicle, throwing things onto the ground. I'm looking, and I'm like, those are guys' clothing. And especially it hit me when she goes back one time and she comes back with a shoebox, some Jordans, and she throws the Jordans on the ground. I'm looking around like, where's the guy? And sure enough, he's standing off to the side, his head all down, not saying anything. He's getting kicked out. In the middle of the afternoon, middle of the early evening, he's getting kicked out. Got a name for those type of guys. They call them hobosexuals. They get with these women and they mooch off these women. And when the women get tired of them, which is pretty much inevitable, they kick these guys out whenever they feel like kicking these guys out. In the most humiliating way, a lot of times this happens. And also, before moving to Atlanta, growing up in central Alabama, Atlanta is always seen as a place where people can go and prosper, especially African-American people. African-American guys go there with nothing in times past, work, grind, and make a life for themselves so that they can be a provider. As time has passed, and we got these guys out here that they don't look at life like that. They want to get over on these women. So some of the women, they to push back against this, they focus a lot on the material, what the guy has, because they don't want to get taken advantage of by one of these hobosexuals. So it's one of the things that will happen that I would see this manifestation from the ladies is there was this one particular woman. She was actually in a church that I was attending. I would see her from time to time when I was outside of church. And this was particularly in the neighborhood where I lived at one point, in the Fourth Ward, right downtown, Midtown area. It's known for being not a cheap area to live in. And so I had let some of the people at the church know I had moved out there. And I thought it was kind of strange because there were some people that like didn't believe me. And I was, that kind of struck me as like, what? I mean, to me, it wasn't a huge deal. I mean, I know it's not cheap to live out there, but it's not like Buckhead, for example. From my perspective, it was not a huge deal. And I found a place that I got a great deal on. It was a really nice place. And come to find out later, it was like an exceptional deal. And so anyway, there was a couple occasions which I would see her as I'm hanging out on the Beltline near the Kroger and Ponce City Market. It was just a short walk from where I live. And in the course of the conversation, it would just somehow, for some reason, it would come up. You know, I was just hanging out here, just live right across the way. And she'd be like, oh, yeah, where? I'm like, just right around the corner. She's looking at me like, no, you don't. You know, with that look like, no, you don't. And the first time it happened, I was like, huh? And the second time, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to just let her roll with that because I don't want to put that out as a thing, because I had noticed in conversation when I would talk to some people at the church, and I would see women's facial expression change when I would talk about where I lived. It was like before, I was just kind of like whatever, not really special, not an important dude to want to get to know or anything like that. But as soon as I would start talking about where I stay, their countenance would change. Now all of a sudden they're interested. And I found that that was like an extreme turn off for me. But it's real, it happens. And for the reasons that I outlined earlier, I can somewhat understand why women would think like that, but it's taken to an extreme in the sense to where who you are as a person doesn't matter so much. It's what you have. That's what's most important for these types of women. And there was another situation which I was eating at a restaurant, and I'm sitting at the bar, and a lady comes up, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, when just practice, you know what I'm saying? She looks fairly decent. I'm gonna start talking to her. See how the conversation goes. So I'm talking to her, and conversation is going pretty good. And so I go for the number. She gives me her number, and I asked her what she likes to do. And she mentioned this particular restaurant. It's going to come up later, amongst some other things. So I'm like, okay. So she's kind of like a foodie. You know, I'm a foodie too. So I give her a call a couple days later. I had just finished eating some dinner that I cooked. I cook a lot. So I call her up, ask her what she's doing. She was actually working at the time. She was doing somebody's hair. And so I'm like, I'm not hating on that. She's doing somebody's hair at her home. Okay, whatever. So I asked her if she want to meet up later, just hang out, talk. So she mentions that restaurant again, and she says call her back when she says she's gonna call me back when she finishes. And so I looked the restaurant up, and it's like a 5-star restaurant off of Peachtree, right in the middle of the downtown area. Really, really nice place. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm not taking her there. I don't even know this woman. I'm not going to take her on a first encounter date to a place like that. And so I call her back. Oh, well, no, she calls me back when she finishes. And she's like, you ready? And I'm like, you know what? I just ate. So I'm not really trying to go to that place. But if you want to hang out and just kind of, sit around, have a drink, some coffee, something like that, that's cool. She was not hearing that. She wanted to go to that restaurant, and that was it. Either it was that restaurant or it was no interaction. So I chose no interaction. They have this thing called a foodie call where the ladies they hit different guys up in different nights of the week to get their dinner, to get their meals. It's like a hustle. Hey, if that's what some women feel like they gotta do, it is what it is. I look at it as being extremely trifling, and so I'm not going for it. The next thing was I had joined after some time like this junior country club, social club type of place where no paid membership every month, and you can go there, you can work, hang out, they have events, things like that. Private social club, junior country club type of place. So there's a bartender there, and she was pretty good looking, and I'm thinking, okay, love to hang out with her. So I tell her that, and I ask her, so where do you go when you want to hang out? And she mentions a place, and she kind of goes back to she has to service someone, and so I look up the place, and it's a very upscale bar, and I'm like, oh, you like the really expensive places, right? She's like, well, you asked. And so I was like, okay, again, that situation of, it's not that I can't take a woman to somewhere like that. It's just like, I don't really see the point in an initial getting to know somebody going somewhere like that. Those are to me like special places. Because I'm not an entertainer, I'm not an athlete, like some very, very small percentage of guys that live in Atlanta. I'm not one of those guys. I'm just a working man. I have just a job, all right? And so that's how I roll. And I was like, I don't know about that. Maybe somewhere else, just for a first kind of get to know you kind of thing. She was like, well, then she stepped it way down to like a hookah bar. And I was like, well, that's not really my vibe. And I know some ladies like those type of places. So I'm like, whatever, that's better. And so she was like, okay. And then there was an event taking place in another section of the building. So I went over to the event, and she comes over a few minutes later, and she was like, nah, I don't want to hang out. She basically like just canceled the date. I was like, okay, that's no problem. So I ran into that some, not a ton, but there were just some occasions that jumped out to me where I was like, hey, they want to go to the most expensive type of places, and if you don't want to take them there, they don't have time for you. And it was a learning experience for me. But what it does is I thought about like the men as providers, economic situations and things like that. Social media, the way that it impacts the way that men and women think. It's really got us engaging each other in some really kind of ridiculous ways, where we are expecting we have really outrageous expectations for one another. And when it comes to a man as a provider, it puts you in a certain type of situation where, you think, I have to grind, I have to work extra hard just to have a mundane sort of experience in the sense of just initial getting to know a woman. I have to go over and above in a material sense. And it's a really skewed type of scenario. And part of the reason why I stay away from those situations is because I understand how those type of things work. And it's like, it can become very predatory in the sense that people trying to get over on one another. So on one sense, you got some women that feel like, I'm going to get over on this guy by having this expensive experience and just kind of using this guy for that. And some guys look at it like, okay, I'm going to give this experience, but I'm going to get something in return. And I don't like those transactional sort of situations because things could go left real easy. And it's a toxic type of situation. So next, moving on, getting a little bit more spiritual. Getting over here to this the feminist vibe. So if you're a single guy, single Christian brother in the Atlanta area, you're gonna run into this a lot. You're gonna see the feminism in the women. And what I've come to observe is it's like a spirit. There's a certain disposition towards men. And remember what I said earlier about the homosexuals, the guys that try to take advantage of women because they don't basically want to work and they don't want to be take leadership in the sense of being a provider. When you get over to feminism, it's an attack on the man as a protector. And the way this works out is, it's kind of like the way in which that I built my discernment, I guess you could say, in this area was in speaking with various women. I would notice that very early, I'm talking about these conversations sometimes within 5 minutes of the conversation beginning. The first time we'd ever met. And, these are, again, restaurant type situations. I go out, get some dinner, and just be places where it was easy to talk to them while we ate our dinners. And so I get there, order my food. Maybe she was already there eating, or she would come after I had begun eating, order her food, and I would just strike up a conversation. And so one of the patterns that I would notice for these type of women was they would start talking about things that they don't like from men. It would be just going like a long list of don't like this, don't like that. And even for a short time, I got onto the online dating, and it was very similar. After I would secure like a phone meeting, a video call with them, and it would be very similar. They would just start the conversation pretty early, very early in the conversation, just speaking about what they don't like. And as I got a little bit further into it, just thinking about those conversations and going back and speaking to other women that had fit this similar type of pattern. I noticed it was also tied up in politics. Atlanta is a heavily Democrat city. So the way in which the politics plays a role in this is really incredible to see. There was this one conversation I was having with this woman, and she was politics came up, and I mentioned how I made an observation. I said something about how like Obama and Trump. One thing I noticed about both of them is that they're kind of like information warriors. They're kind of like info warriors. They know how to speak in such a way as to get a certain response out of people, whether you like them or not. And as I'm telling this woman this, she just starts spazzing out, talking about how she's for inclusion. She's not. It was like she started on this kind of Democrat talking point about how she's open, she's inclusive, she doesn't discriminate against anyone. Now, this is a black woman I'm speaking to, and I'm just kind of like, what are you talking about? And she was like, you said you mentioned Trump, and it was like just the word Trump. She just started spazzing out, and I'm like, what is that? Politically, I'm independent. I look at the two parties as two cheeks on the same back alley BBL. And to see that, cultish type of behavior, politically, a political cult, and it impacts the relationship scene, because it's like, if someone in a relationship is so hardcore for a particular political viewpoint, it's going to be difficult for them to mesh with someone that doesn't share their exact same viewpoint. And so even dating becomes politicized. If you're a Republican, you can't get with a Democrat. If you're a Democrat, you can't get with a Republican. I mean, I don't know what the independent people are going to do. This is insane how we've allowed politics to get into personal relationships. It's ridiculous, actually. Other situations in which it really was eye-opening, again, on the Democrat perspective on things, speaking to some women, and they would mention in the conversations, this was mostly of the online women that I would meet online, and they would quickly bring up this is like introductory type of things, introductory conversations, just telling me about themselves, and some of them mentioned that they were allies. I'm like, ally, what do you mean? And they would talk about how they were LGBTQ allies. Again, this political thing, I'm like, what does this have to do with heterosexual engagement, a heterosexual situation? What does bringing up you're an LGBTQ ally have to do with this? Then I thought deeper about it, and I'm like, well, it's actually really important, because that's going to affect how people raise their children, especially when children come into the picture. What type of influences are people going to allow their children to be around? And that is a red line, and so I saw these things, and it goes back into feminism, because it's like, one of the things that come out from talking to these women once you get past their political stances and how, strident, how unmovable they were on those issues, it would get over or talk about what they don't like from men. After speaking a little bit more with them, then would come up about things in the past. And, they would tell me about things that happened. They wouldn't go into a ton of detail, but abuse, things like that happened to them in the past. Now, I mentioned this to a male friend of mine. I think it was a male cousin. He was kind of surprised that the women would be that open with me. I don't know why. I thank God that it's like that, where people just feel comfortable speaking with me, and that's cool. I appreciate that. And so, yeah, it would just be this particular pattern of the men failing them at an early age in their life. And that protector, that perspective that they have of the man as being a protector, that was really damaged for them. And so taking on the identity, the hardcore Democrat identity, the feminist identity, that was a means of putting up a boundary, establishing some sort of boundary against that predator man. And when I realized that, it kind of made me sad, man. I'm like, man, I didn't realize how many women get abused. It apparently a lot, because this thing was really prevalent. This pattern here was very common. There was this one woman I went on a date with. I just met her out on the Beltline. I seen her. I found her attractive. I'm like, okay, let's see. So I started talking with her. Boom, get her number. Set up a date. We go on a date in Ponce City Market. I wanted to pick something real close to where I live. So I walk over and meet up with her. We have our meal, and conversation again that don't like that came up. So I'm listening to that, trying to, at this point, it had gotten to a point where it was kind of like I would just see the pattern immediately. And it's just like, man, here we go again. So we finish our meal, and I suggest a place to go and talk. Really cool place. They have like some swings that they built down the Beltline about a quarter of a mile. Cool place, like grown-up swing, like grown-ups can sit and hang out and just talk. Perfect place to have a conversation. So we go there, and we're talking about some things, and the topic of abuse comes up. I won't say it was just like a random kind of topic or organically came up. I was pushing the conversation in a certain direction, because I'm like, okay, if that pattern hit, then this other pattern's got to hit. So I'm gonna see. And so, sure enough, I'm describing some kind of scenario, and something that I say, it triggered her. So she like raises her voice, and I'm thinking to myself like, wow, I can't stand that. I can't stand that. But I'm like, just chill out. We just having a conversation. I'm just going over a scenario. I didn't know about what had happened to her. She didn't go into detail. I was just speaking about a common scenario. And so I was just like, man, there's so much. It's like they want a man, but there's so much baggage and pain and trauma that they're dealing with. And it really, I don't think that they can see how big of a turnoff that is to a guy that's not. The guy is not that guy, that abuser, that manipulator. The thing that the ladies that you're showing this guy is that you don't need to be out here dating. You need to be somewhere with the therapia, as scripture calls it. Speaking to somebody that can help you work through these problems. From a Christian standpoint, getting in prayer, working through these issues before going out and speaking to guys, because you could come across a good guy that's willing to deal with situations that people went through in their past, because I have situations in my past as well. The difference is that I'm not like projecting that onto other people that I meet. You know, I understand that if I set my boundaries, things go a certain way, that things go a way that is respectful to me and respectful to the other person. That was something that really blew me away, and that was very common. Now, getting over into the more spiritual, again, you know, the second part of that verse that I didn't go into, the Timothy, 1 Timothy 4, after forbidding marriage, commanding to abstain from meats. All right, so I'm not going to go into that, but it comes up because when I first moved to Atlanta and was searching for a place to that I was going to eventually live, I stayed at an Airbnb in the West End. And so, like, my first evening after parking in U-Haul, I went for a walk on the main strip there. Went not too far. I wasn't staying too far from that main strip in the West End when they have like the little shops and things like that. And I walked down there immediately. The incense, smell of that incense hits me. So many of the restaurants, vegan restaurants. So I noticed there's a particular type of religious, spiritual vibe to the place. And so that was like again, another foreshadowing. Now, in this particular context, something that will happen that I would bump into is the astrology chicks. So what the astrology chicks is, within the first 15, 30 seconds of speaking with them, they're going to ask you, when were you born? And based on the answer that you give them, they will either, the conversation is going to dry up real quick, or you can continue speaking with them. So based on whatever sort of astrological calculations that they make in their mind about you as a person, guy, man, they're going to roll with that instead of actually trying to get to know you as a person. Now, on one hand, I found that to be extremely immature. So those type of women, the conversation, even if they felt like it was a good match, I would make the conversation go dry. Like, I wanted that interaction to end just as soon as it began, because it's like, if this is how it's starting, you know, I'm good on that. We're not in high school anymore. That's how it felt. So childish to me to hear women say that, grown women say something like that, you know. And but I understand that astrology, it can get pretty deep, and it leads into other things, other aspects of the occult. And you know, I mentioned in my video about the Cascade Springs, seeing the woman there reading a book on witchcraft. There would be pop-up shops, different areas around the downtown areas. I would be walking around, I would see the women. It was 90% women doing this. They would be selling the crystals, doing, having little signs for doing Reiki type of energy work. These sorts of things has attracted the mind of many women in the city, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Even the veganism, at the church I was going to, they had a meeting once for people to out, like a small group that meet up and just talk. But this is a church. We know each other from church. Everybody goes to church. I'm assuming everybody's a Christian. So the place that they chose for the dinner was a vegan spot. It's just it has kind of just infiltrated everything, and that was something that really kind of, it just astonished me. In the deep South, this is not a common sort of thing, but then I come to realize Atlanta is more of an East Coast city. It's not a southern city. It used to be, but it's not like that. It's more like an East Coast city in the sense of, especially when it comes to things like the religious, spiritual flavor of the area. All right. So we got our gold diggers. They want the ballers or the tricks, either one. We got our feminist ladies that have a certain sort of disdain for men deep down inside, but they want a man though, but they're not lesbians. And there's that issue that they have to deal with in their own mind, and then it pours out in how they interact with men and how they project things that happen to them onto those guys that they never met before. And then we get to the spiritual with the women involved with the occult, witchcraft, and things like that. I want to summarize this with a couple stories of dealing with sorority women. Now, sorority women were very interesting because it's like they were more sensible when it comes to the provider role. They understood that, men, women, we can work together. We have our careers and we could do this thing, the provider aspect, and they expect for the guys to carry their weight. All right. So that wasn't an issue that I had with them. The issue of the feminism issue, that's going to come up in an interesting way. So let me just get started. So the first one, there was this guy that I went to high school with. He lives in Atlanta, and I bumped into him, and he wanted to introduce me to someone. So I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. So he introduced me to a woman that was in the same sorority. Now he's in a fraternity. He introduced me to a woman that's in the same sorority as his girlfriend was in. So I'm like, okay, he had a get together over his house. I met the woman, spoke with her, seemed like, okay, she's pretty cool. So we settled on a date. A few days later, I pull up at her house, and I remember I went in her house. She bought it, hadn't been at the place for too long, hadn't been had her mortgage for very long, maybe a year or two. And so, she was like, excuse me, I don't have much furniture, which I'm not tripping. I know she probably has a very high mortgage. She didn't have an extremely high paying job. I get it, right? So then it's time to go. And she says, my car's a little messy, and she said, don't judge me, my car's a little messy. So I'm like, okay, no problem. So I get in the car and I notice that the seat doesn't go back far enough for me because I'm pretty tall. And so I'm like, you know what, let's just take my car. Now my car at the time, it was messy too. And so the roof, the headliner was starting to sag, and my cloth seats, I had smoked one too many cigars in the car. So it was like, it wasn't the most tip top, but it wasn't like trash either. And so anyway, we go to, I asked her, where you want to go? So she recommended like a Chili's or something. So it was like, that was very reasonable. I'm like, man, it's not going so bad. So everything was just, it seemed to be reasonable. So we go, we have some food, we have some drink, we just talking, pretty cool evening. So I get a call from her like a day or two later, and she just starts going off on me. And she's like, you're a bum, your car, she basically did a psychological analysis of me based on my car. So since my car wasn't like immaculate and new, then that meant that I was like mentally disturbed. And so she goes into this story talking about how her ex-husband, he didn't put carpet on the floor. He just left the stuff the padding that goes underneath the carpet. That was what they had in their house. He never put the actual carpet on over the padding. Something like that. Anyway, that's the guy she chose to marry. And so she has a relationship with him. It breaks up. He goes off, gets remarried. Now she tells me this. He gets remarried. He's living his life. So she hasn't gotten remarried. And so she's going over all this stuff with me. And so she's basically making a connection between me and him. And so he's a bad guy. He's mentally deficient, in her eyes. And so that must mean that I am too. And I'm just like, what? I mean, it was like insidious, man. It was way too much energy. It was like demonic almost. Like how much vitriol she was just spewing at me. Now during the day, everything was cool. And like she said out of her own mouth, her car was messy too. So it's just like, man, what? Oh man, that was nuts. So the next one, I'll call this one the manifester. So this one was the most subtle of all. Again, like I say, so this one, she was very pretty. I remember I met her at a restaurant, again at the bar like area where you could talk easily. And I was thinking, okay, now she happened to be in the rival where I had to come to learn all this. She was in the rival sorority as the other sorority girl I talked about earlier. So anyway, we set on a date. Well, no, we didn't set on a date. We just exchanged numbers. So the first conversation, speaking about various different things. So I'm looking for those patterns again, and I'm not seeing them. She was very reasonable when it comes to things like provider. The man is a provider. And also, she wasn't on the feminist. I didn't get that feminist vibe. So what I would do to test for that feminism, I would use this scenario. There's two boats, my boat, your boat. So we get together. What do? Do we kind of hitch our boats together and ride off into the sunset? You stay in your boat, I stay in my boat. Do you want me to leave my boat and get into your boat? Or do you want to leave your boat and get into my boat? And so she was like, I want to get into your boat. I don't want to be in the leadership position. So I'm like, okay, all right. So not a gold digger, not on some feminist, got to be in the lead of things from a material standpoint. So now the only thing was left was the spiritual. So at the end of our first conversation, I was like, so what is it that you're all about in a way? And she was like, in our sorority, we work and we pray. And so that was some food for thought. I'm like, work and pray. Okay. Yeah. So between the first and second conversation, I look up the sorority, and at that point I'm learning about what I came across was the denouncers, the women that had denounced from her sorority in particular, and some of the things that they spoke about. I didn't know at the time that sororities were so ritualistic and basically like a modern day version of the ancient mystery schools, the ancient mystery cults from Greece. All right. So those mystery schools and mystery cults are still with us in the 21st century. And then I looked up the dictionary of demons and deities in the Bible, and I looked up the particular goddess that she had vowed herself to through the ritual initiation into that sorority, the aspects of that entity. And from what she was telling me, her life was reflecting that deity. And it made me think about the scripture to talk about our lives should reflect Christ. Well, basically, her life was reflecting that entity, which scripture would refer to as a demon. And Paul, when he was in those areas that had those mystery cults, and he said the things that these people worship, they worship demons. And that blew me away. But it was this internal battle I was having because, at this point, it was this was after like a year or so of having these interactions with women and things like that. And I'm just like, man, I'm getting tired. I'm like trying to find a way to rationalize in my mind, like, well, maybe it's not that bad. I could kind of ease into telling her how this stuff works, and maybe I could get her to come around. Because I'm thinking to myself, man, she is fine. I'm starting to compromise in my mind. The flesh is like, come on, dude, you gotta, man. Other than that, she got everything else going on. She intelligent. She fine. She's seemed to be compassionate. Concerned about community. Concerned about people that are in a weakened state in life. I was like, man, I can work with this. So then we have our second conversation. So she goes into a little bit more detail. I ask her, what do you mean by pray? And before I asked her that, one of the things that really kind of made me think, or I don't like to use the word red flag, but this was like, what? She told me that, like, say, she used a scenario. It's like, say we get together, look, I'm going to have my meetings with my sorors, and we're going to go and we're going to do our thing, and just don't ask me about it. And I'm like, so you gonna go hang out with your girlfriends basically, but I can't ask you like what y'all were doing. She was like, no. And I'm like, what? Like, nah, man, that's what is that? Now I'm thinking to myself, like, going back to leading in marriage, how can a man lead in that type of scenario? Like, what? We hear the women talk about these down low men and get in these relationships, and then they sitting up marrying a woman and sitting up there want to be in a secret relationship with a man. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that sounds like DL woman territory. Marry a man and then go hang out with your girls and do all kind of freaky stuff, right? That's the first thing that come to my mind. So then I asked her about pray. What do you mean by pray? So she gave me an example of what she meant. Said she does this thing called manifesting. So I'm asking her, no, what is manifesting? So she gives me this example. So she's in youth criminal justice. So she's tracked out, or she's laid out her career track, going into adult, then making it into a judge. So she sees that in order for her to get to where she wants to go, she has to get the approval of certain authorities along the way, namely judges. There's a problem. The judge that is an authority along her path, her career track, is in the rival sorority that she's in. So what she does is she tells me that over the course of a few months, she manifests by laying in her bed at night as she's falling off to sleep, and she just thinks of or meditates on that judge, something happening to her, that she gets removed from her position so that she's no longer a hindrance to this woman. And she says that she does this, and about 5 or 6 months later, the woman, she has to leave from her position. I don't remember exactly what she said happened to her. Did she get sick or something? But she's no longer in her position. And someone is in, another woman judge that happens to be in the same sorority that she's in, becomes the judge now. So now it's like a green light. She could follow her career track. So when she says this, I'm like, man, this is witchcraft. This is witchcraft. There's nothing Christian, there's nothing scriptural about this at all. And it really I was so disheartened, because I was thinking on one hand, man, I could talk to her and, kind of lead her out of that foolishness. But it's like she was in a little bit too deep. Then dealing with my flesh, I'm just like, I can see the tension within myself. It's like the spirit man is like, walk away. The flesh is like, hey man, you can work with her. I mean, look, she is fine. And so we had a date set though. After she told me that she was a manifester, we still had settled on a date a couple days from then. So the day of the date come, I'm working that day. I mean, it was during a weekday. She was working too. We had scheduled to have the date early afternoon when we get off of work. Well, about 2 hours or so before that time, I'm seeing that I'm not going to be able to get a haircut in time to make it to the date. So I shoot her a text and ask her, can we push it back an hour? And I didn't get a response, but I went ahead and got my haircut. So I'm thinking, well, she is at work, whatever. And so when I get back, I hit her up again, no response. Date fell through, whatever. She flaked, I don't know, didn't happen. And I was actually glad that it didn't, because that was a tough one for me. And it was so crazy, like looking back on it, it was like outside of the spiritual, everything else, it was like she checked all the boxes. I don't have a list. My list is like beautiful, sensible. That's my list. She was beautiful and she was sensible when it comes to the material. That one was a tough one. that one really made me think about myself and how it's like, man, when we in single and Lonelyville, we start to rationalize some stuff, guys, that, oh man, this stuff gets deep. And it doesn't come at you like you think it's gonna come. It'd be like, oh, well, if she wasn't attractive, it'd be a lot easier to be like, she, it is not gonna work. But man, when she is attractive on all the levels that you like, minus that spiritual, it's kind of like, you know what? You start to rationalize in your mind. And it's like, just thinking about these situations that I laid out, it's not like I'm on some women got this issue. No, listen, man, we are under attack. The enemy is not flesh and blood. The enemy is not women. Men and women, 21st century, United States, the West, we are under attack from getting together in a scriptural relationship, scriptural marriage. Men, take the lead. Get you a wife. Lead your home. Be a provider, protector, priest. That right there, that is under attack. Now, if you want to do anything else other than that, Atlanta is the place to be. Okay, I'm telling you, it is the place to be. But if you want to do man, lead your family, provide, protect, be the priest over your household, you're gonna come up against some resistance, major resistance. There will be a huge attempt to prevent you, to deny you that. Okay? This is a spiritual attack. It will manifest through the society, and other aspects will manifest against your own mind, rationalizing things that really you don't need to be playing around with. This is not a game. Can't get with some woman and expect to change her mind. What you get is what you get. All right? If it's not settled at the beginning, you can't bet on it being fixed with time on the back end. I just want to leave you guys with that. Fellas, you want to do things the right way, the scriptural way. The way of the warfighter is a noble path because it's a difficult path. Finding a good wife, man, it's something that's, if you want something like that, you got to fight for it. Talking about what you want as far as beautiful and sensible, it's going to come at a cost. Practice courage, self-control, righteousness, discernment. That way of the warfighter is a noble way. It's a righteous way to go. And I want to encourage brothers out there to stay on that path because it's gonna pay off. I tell myself this, hey, I don't have all the answers. I'm a man, I'm fallible. I'm not the most awesomest guy ever. And so I have to reflect and think about things that I've done, good women that I've let slip away because of hang up I have about beauty or something like that. Still trying to work through those things. But I understand that, hey man, the scriptures say beautiful and sensible. I'm going to stand on that. Yeah, so it is what it is, man. It's the battle done. I say peace.